Hi, and welcome to Schmooze with Suze. I'm Suze Montgomery, your host, and we've been here a long time. We've been interviewing people in our community primarily, or sometimes we kind of lapse into politics just for fun because it amuses me, but mostly about people in your community that make an impact and change people's lives. And today we're interviewing Jennifer Parkinson for the second time. She was on a previous show, if you remember, about Parkinson's disease. I rarely ever have guests come back, and I can't remember the last time I did for a second round, but I thought it was important to get you back here because we didn't give you enough time, and you really have a great message, and you have great information. And I'm looking at statistics. Since I talked to you last, I've been watching the statistics on Parkinson's. It's rocketing. It's going off the charts. What's up?
Well, I think this is totally my opinion. That number one, we're able to diagnose it and see the symptoms earlier. But now we have to take a look at why this is happening, and it's, there's theories about why people get Parkinson's. Things like traumatic brain injury, car accidents, concussions, head injuries, but then we have to take a look at what's going on in our environment. So what are we putting into our bodies? What kind of food we're, ingesting, and then just the environment around us.
I have to agree with that because the research that I've been doing points to pesticides, inorganic materials, what we're eating, how we're, it's not necessarily lifestyle. It's about our ingesting things, or maybe, like with my cancer I kind of isolated that as well as to like groundwater that had chemicals in it because we live in an ag area.
Right.
Or people that grew up in an ag area with inorganic chemicals and pesticides and fertilizers too. So that led me to believe that, everybody's at risk. I mean, how do you get the message out? And that's not conclusive evidence. That's just me doing my stuff.
Right, and it's in certain areas it's going to be more prevalent, and so that's one of the things that the Parkinson Foundation has been doing with their prevalence project, was to actually look and see where, how many people with Parkinson's they can identify, but also what areas,
So they're starting to isolate.
Yeah, so trying to see exactly where those areas are and who's more affected. Is it men? Is it women? Is it Hispanics? Is it African Americans? So really taking a look at why we're getting this and who is more at risk. So.
Now, you were diagnosed at a very early age, right?
Yes.
How old were you?
I was 32 when I was diagnosed finally.
That's early.
And my first symptom that I noticed was at 30. That's when I had the tremor in my right hand.
And then other symptomatic things started to appear.
Gradually,
correct?
I started to have the tremor more and more. It became a continuous tremor. That started 6 weeks after my son was born.
Oh my God! How do you cope? I mean, with small children, with a disease like Parkinson's, I mean, you can't be an absentee mom. I mean, you got to lift kids. You have to feed children.
Right, and a few years after I was diagnosed, I became a single mom. So I had to be there for my kids. They have always been the one thing that always motivated me and kept me going because I knew I needed to be there for them. Again, when I first started having the tremor, my son was only 6 weeks old. My daughter was 3 years old. Then as more symptoms started, it got more challenging. I had trouble walking. I was falling. I started freezing where I couldn't move at all sometimes, and that was happening several times a day. So it was just progressing. It was getting worse, and my kids needed me. I needed to be there for them. I wasn't able to, take my kids outside in the backyard because I can't chase after them. I wasn't able to take them to the park and actually play with them because I had to sit there on the bench and just kind of watch them on the playground. I wasn't the mom I wanted to be. And those days, you know, our days started in the morning with me taking my medication and waiting for it to kick in. They were up already, running around the house, needing to get dressed. They needed me to fix breakfast for them, get them ready for school. And I'm still trying to sit up. I can't roll over in the bed yet. I had to gradually get to that point and finally get to where I could sit up in the bed and then eventually stand. But that was a 30 to 45-minute process, waiting for medication to kick in. The medication alone was just not enough. I was struggling, you know, and all that was happening was my symptoms kept getting worse. You know, the medication wasn't keeping me from progressing. It was just symptomatic management that didn't last that long.
Is
So
that
it was
because-
just up and down all day long.
Well, and how many years ago was this?
This was, so I was diagnosed almost 14 years ago.
So you would think, 14 years is not that long ago, but you would think that the progression of medications and research, they would have better drugs by that time.
At that time, we still were a little limited. They were starting to have different medications called dopamine agonists that can help with some of the symptoms. They were starting to have some other options, but it's really been these last few years that they're starting to develop more and more ways to deliver the medication. So there's a drug called Sinemet, and it's levodopa. That was the first drug, levodopa, that was used back in 1964 for Parkinson's. Kind of discovered that it treated and helped the symptoms of Parkinson's kind of by accident. So that's still the best drug, the most powerful drug that really helps the symptoms in Parkinson's. It has side effects called dyskinesia. And as you are taking more and more of it, you need more, and you start having these extra movements that make it really difficult to sit still. That's a side effect of the medication. It's not a symptom of Parkinson's.
So your medication therapy, so are they like juggling to get a threshold or to get you stabilized?
Right, so the idea is that you really have to work with your doctor in order to get that right dosage. So if you've got, say you're taking Sinemet and then you're taking another drug to try and offset those, the symptoms, you have to get the right dosage. And it's not the same across the board. So every person's different how they respond to it. So it can be difficult. And over the years, you have to keep changing those things. Luckily though, for me, I kind of was able to kind of halt that quite a bit. I discovered that through boxing and through exercise, I was able to combat the symptoms much better than I ever did with the medication alone. I've discovered that through boxing, I was able to start fighting through some of the freezing episodes that I was having. I started having more energy. I started to have less muscle rigidity, and I started moving better.
Now you have a business, but
I do.
You developed your own business.
Yes, yes. So
How'd you get involved in boxing? Period, though.
Well, it was about 4 years after I was diagnosed. Things were progressing. I was just getting worse. The freezing episodes were getting to be more and more. And I was just going from dose to dose with the medication, just at a barely functioning level. And I got to a point that I knew I needed to do something. I wanted to be there for my kids. I wanted to be a mom to my kids. And I knew if I kept letting this happen, it was just going to get worse.
But you can't control it. Or can you?
You can. There are ways to kind of take back control over that. And that's what I discovered through boxing. There was a program in Indiana called Rock Steady Boxing, and they were teaching boxing to people who have Parkinson's. It was only one in the country. So I just started working with a trainer here. He was an 8-time world kickboxing champion.
Wow.
Yes. And I told him that I had Parkinson's disease, and I had heard about a program that was helping people with the symptoms through boxing training. And so I started training with him. I was actually training with other fighters, so guys that were getting in the ring that weekend to fight. It was very intense, hard workout. And when I first started with them, we were doing push-ups and burpees and
What's
planks. Burpees are kind of where you have to drop down to the floor, do push-ups, and jump back up again.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So we were doing things like that, weights, just really, working on boxing training techniques, on focus mitts, on heavy bags, doing boxing drills, running.
How often were you doing this?
In the beginning, I started with 1 or 2 days a week, and then I eventually got up to about 5 days a week.
That's a lot of training.
Yeah. Yes. But in the beginning, it was incredibly hard. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I started training, and within that first 15 minutes, just doing the warm-up, my body would start shutting down. My muscles would get really, really rigid. I'd have trouble moving. I'd get down into a push-up and get stuck, and I couldn't move. A lot of the guys, the fighters that I was training with were so good with me, and they were like, calling out to the coach, Jen's down, we need to do something. So he'd get me back up. I was taking a drug at that time. It was a rescue drug for Parkinson's. It was an injection. And my trainer would stop the class, go give me the shot, and tell me to get back in the ring. His motto was, you finish what you start. So there was never,
wow,
ever,
you couldn't wimp out,
never,
could you?
ever a time that I didn't finish a class. So what he would do is, as I would start slowing down, I would start struggling to move, he would just push me through it. He'd talk me through the workouts. He'd talk me through, move your hands, move your legs, just keep me moving. And that was very much the key to pushing through this. I learned through those workouts how to push myself, and I learned how strong I really was when I did that. It changed my whole mindset. I went from this knowledge that I have this incurable progressive disease. I was told there's nothing I could do about it. I was told that it was just going to get worse and I'd be in a wheelchair within 10 years. And I went from this kind of impossibility of I have no control, I can't change anything, to I can do anything I set my mind to. And it changed everything. That mindset made me believe, and my coach made me believe, that I could push through this. And that's what I did.
You're incredible, because you just wouldn't accept the diagnosis.
No, I'm stubborn.
You must be really stubborn.
My dad always told me, he said that you're stubborn and hard-headed and I can't talk to you about anything. And he was right.
And it saved your life. It saved your life.
It did.
And now the kids are watching this, right? Your children are watching this, and the kids are like, okay, mom's different, okay, but they have probably total respect for what you do. Are they involved in any of this?
Well, things have changed throughout the years. So you have to realize that my kids never saw me any other way.
Okay, that's true.
They had always seen me with Parkinson's. When they were young, they can remember having to help me And I can remember my son Jack, when I started boxing, he said, "Mom, you don't have Parkinson's anymore." And I said, "Well, I still have it." And I said, "It's because the boxing, that's helping me a lot." He said, "You need to keep doing that." And I said, "Yeah." I said, it does really help me a lot. But he's funny. I remember we were in the car one day. He couldn't have been more than like 5. And he starts asking me about Parkinson's. And he asked me if he was going to get Parkinson's too. And I said, probably not. More than likely, I don't think you're going to get this. And he said, "But our last name is Parkinson. Isn't that why you have it?" So
That's a kid.
Yeah, I know.
They're so
you think if we have our
ego-centered.
last name,
Yeah.
Parkinson, and Mom has the disease,
What a deal.
Yeah, what are the odds of that happening?
Pretty rare.
Yes.
Okay.
So
It cracks me up.
yeah, so he kind of was
Crystallized.
putting those together, and I said, "No, that's not why I have it." And you would have to know my son Jack, but this 3-hour conversation followed with that.
Oh
but
my God. He's really curious.
Yes, he very much is, and I knew when he was about 3 or 4 years old he was going to be smarter than me.
Oh, that is amazing, because kids are ego-centered, but kids also personalize everything. It's just the nature of kids.
Right.
But it's interesting to me how you had enough wherewithal within thinking about your disease and researching boxing. I mean, like boxing, it's like Parkinson's is over here, boxing is over here. I mean, they just don't intersect, but they do. And
Yes.
The medical community, are they on board? What do they say?
Yes, actually, they have come around.
You're teaching them.
So it's taken a little while. When we actually helped start one of the first, actually was the very first Rock City boxing affiliate in the country, is in Costa Mesa. And the woman who started that, we started to connect, and I talked with her quite a bit, and got, kind of helped her get started in the early stages. And then I went on to start 2 more Rock City boxing affiliates. But what I have found was that it wasn't enough. It was a boxing class, and we were getting an enormous amount of people. My second Rock City boxing affiliate, we had 90 people with Parkinson's, and it just kept growing. And it was at that point that we knew that it had to be more than just a class. I was getting people lining up after class, asking me questions, asking me about resources, asking about support. They needed support, they needed education, they were looking for information, and they were looking for something that wasn't available. And so that's when we decided that it was more important to provide that support. And that's when NEUROBOXING was born. I started NEUROBOXING in 2016, not only to work with people with Parkinson's, but other neurological conditions.
Such as?
We work with MS, stroke, and traumatic brain injury.
So it's wiring in the brain, correct?
Yes.
So they all have different applications.
Exactly.
Is there a set of exercise or not?
Yeah, there's different things that, depending on the disease, what's going to work best for that particular condition.
Okay.
And then there are things that you need to be aware of, like as in MS, the people with MS have issues with overheating. So you
Correct.
don't want to go that intense, vigorous exercise the same as you would for somebody with Parkinson's. The intense forced exercise is what really helps with people with Parkinson's, but with MS, if you get overheated, you're basically, it's detrimental. So it's making sure that they're staying cool. It's making sure that they're taking breaks. and they can still box, they can still do those types of exercises, but it just has to be a well-controlled environment in order to do that. So one of our main focuses in neuroboxing is to educate. So not just educating people with Parkinson's, other neurological disorders, their families, but the community, the trainers, especially the personal trainers, people that are working with people with these conditions to make sure that they have a good understanding of the diseases and know how to work with them properly without causing further injury.
Would they be like physical therapists that you'd be working
We
with?
work with, we have a 5-day certification program. As of right now, we have 5 affiliates since 2016, and we have our new trainees going through. We're actually doing our training camp this week, so we're right in the middle of it right now.
You're in crazy time.
So
Thanks for coming in.
tomorrow is our 3rd day, actually. So we have new trainees from Pasadena, Simi Valley, and Woodland Hills. And we'll be starting our new trainees for July will be in Camarillo, in Ventura, and in Santa Ana.
This just blows me away because it's so anti everything that you've been taught, you know, when we're kids. You know, medicine, take a pill, this is my mother. Take a pill, you're gonna feel better in 15 minutes because you know, we're driven by the medical world. But this is something completely different.
Well, exercise is medicine.
It is, but it's a hard educational component to teach someone. They're
is.
just not oriented that way. I mean, I have students, I've got like a couple hundred students, and my students range in age from 85 to 105, my oldest is. And several of them have either MS or they have Parkinson's. And the Parkinson's people, you know, by just observing them over the past 20 years, the doctors, the medical community really doesn't know what to do in a certain sense. They have very limited tools in their toolkit to give them. So either my students are either totally stoned out and fall asleep in my class, probably because I'm also probably boring as hell, or B, they don't give them enough and they continue to have the tremors.
Right.
What's the sweet spot?
Right. So the neuros are starting to understand how effective our programs are. It took us a while to get them to that point. When we first started, they said, no, our patients can't do this. This is not something they're able to do. Then we started to get members into our program, and they would go see their doctor, and they were getting better. They were improving. And they said, what are you doing? And I said, let me tell you what I'm doing. And they would tell them all about the boxing program. So it's been our members that have been educating the doctors about what's happening, and they're seeing the results. They're seeing the improvement in the symptoms. So now, guess what? They're recommending our program. So when somebody comes in early diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, they're recommending and referring people to the program.
If you find the right physicians.
There's quite a few now.
Really? They're finally waking up.
Most of them do know about our program now, and they do refer their patients to us.
This is most interesting because traditional medicine is one thing. That's what we all grew up with, right? Like my mom, take a pill, you'll feel better. But the non-traditional medicine, which is not necessarily, you know, take herbs and you're going to be fine. That's at the other end of the spectrum. But yours uses a combination of take your medication that's prescribed, but also the exercise component, which is the physical attributes or the physical, you know, therapies that, you know, because most people that have this have been told not to overexcite, right?
Exactly. So before these types of programs were created, the thought process was people with Parkinson's can't do much. They're not able to. But so the exercise programs were geared for chair exercises only.
Correct.
Because people with Parkinson's can't do anything
No.
like standing up. They can't get down to the floor, those kind of things. And with our program, we have shown that yes, they can. We have people that come in with walkers, wheelchairs, canes. They're getting down to the floor. We make sure that they're getting comfortable with getting down to the floor and
That's
back up again.
amazing.
And they're learning to get back up on their own now. They're learning to sit down in a chair and be able to stand back up without kind of using their hands to kind of push them back up, because they start losing a lot of strength to be able to do that. They're doing burpees. They're doing push-ups. They're doing planks. They're doing sit-ups. They're doing all those things that they were told they can't do. With the program that we're doing, they're seeing improvement. They're getting up out of the chair on their own. They're getting up off the floor on their own. And they're even jogging in the class. They're walking backwards in the class. They're doing jumping jacks.
Did you ever think you'd be doing this years ago?
No,
I mean, this
no.
is like miracle stuff, right?
Yeah, this was not in my kind of,
No, it wasn't
yeah,
part of your consciousness.
It wasn't part of me whatsoever, because I was an RN. I was going about my my career
that's
as
the
a nurse.
secret.
Yeah,
So you actually
I was a
have
nurse.
lot of that's your
yeah,
background.
right.
I think we just ran out of time.
Yeah.
Darn, this is the second time we ran out of time. Thank you for agreeing to come back, especially with your crazy hell week schedule this
Yes,
week. But I think at the bottom of on the screen, there's Jen's information on there. And please, if you know anybody that could use this kind of education or therapies, please give them a call. I think this is miracle stuff. And you're like Wonder Woman. I'm so impressed. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.